Look closely at our classrooms, our workplaces, and our laws, and you will notice a dominant theme: the absolute pursuit of absolute safety. On the surface, preventing harm sounds noble, but human history teaches us that every system has a hidden cost. When a society becomes obsessed with avoiding risk, it eliminates the exact traits that allow individuals to stand up to power. The rugged, independent citizen is being replaced by a highly managed, compliant subject. This transformation follows a multi-layered framework that has quietly reshaped our socio-economic reality and shrunk the private family. We can trace this framework through 4 distinct layers, building from evolutionary biology up through institutional design, into radical social theory, and finally, legal philosophy. A simple culture war framing ignores the underlying structural operating system that governs these changes. Understanding this architecture reveals how individual survival tactics were eventually weaponized to build the modern administrative state. To understand how human behavior is changing today, we have to look at how nature solves problems when the stakes are life and death. Biologists refer to this as alternative reproductive tactics, or ARTs. Within the same species, males develop completely different strategies to pass on their genes. The most common is the dominant male, like this silverback gorilla, which uses physical strength to guard a territory. But nature also creates the sneaker male. As seen in sockeye salmon, these are smaller males who cannot compete in a raw test of strength. Instead, they use clever behavior, employing female mimicry to adopt the non-threatening body language of females, allowing them to bypass the dominant male's guard. In human terms, that dominant archetype represents traditional masculinity: competitive, tough, and independent. But as our culture shifts to value emotional harmony above all else, that style is increasingly viewed as a liability. In response, many men adopt an adaptive strategy. By mastering progressive language and aligning with feminist movements, they effectively lower the natural defenses of the social spaces around them. This tactic can be a cynical mask: the woke misogynist who uses progressive vocabulary to gain social capital. However, it can also be a cooperative adaptation for men who do not fit into traditional masculine hierarchies and choose to seek community in egalitarian environments. Rejecting traditional competitive dominance in favor of linguistic cooperation begins as a raw evolutionary survival strategy to maintain social relevance. This shift becomes pronounced as men get older. Declining physical energy and testosterone levels force a pivot away from high-stress, competitive hierarchies toward more cooperative social roles. This chart tracks advancing age alongside declining testosterone, plotted against rising non-kin social support. Older men in cooperative civic spaces show a significant testosterone drop. This lowered baseline reduces aggression, facilitating a nurturant persona that correlates with increased social validation from these new groups. Adopting a new persona naturally creates friction. If a person acts like a passionate ally while secretly knowing it is just a tactic, the brain experiences a distinct sense of mental discomfort, a concept known as cognitive dissonance. The human mind hates feeling like a fraud. To resolve this internal friction, the brain naturally and unconsciously shifts its internal beliefs to match its outward compliant behavior. This psychological mechanism allows older men facing deficits in traditional areas of success to construct a new identity as a good man. It replaces their lost traditional status with a clear sense of moral superiority. Because the human brain possesses neuroplasticity, what begins as a calculated social tactic results in an authentic ideological identity. While this adaptation helps individuals find community, a major crisis emerges when these female-aligned traits are written into the foundations of our public institutions. Over the past several decades, early educational environments have been re-engineered. Success now requires long hours of sedentary focus and high verbal compliance, while high-energy, boundary-testing male behaviors are routinely pathologized as disorders. Evaluation of social behavioral skills creates an unearned grading premium for girls, structurally disadvantaging boys early in the academic pipeline. This chart visualizes the demographic imbalance this pipeline creates. Women now outnumber men in higher education by an approximate 60-40 ratio, which has completely reshaped the labor pool of the knowledge economy. The modern post-industrial workplace formalizes this displacement. In an economy built on communication and service, soft skills and linguistic conformity have become the primary currency of professional survival. This cultural shift actively vilifies traditional masculine traits, labeling average characteristics like risk tolerance and emotional stoicism as moral defects. Society has created an artificial hierarchy, an institutional matrix where a highly compliant, risk-averse mindset is mandated as the superior mode of existence. The political power required to institutionalize this behavioral monoculture originated in mid-20th century radical theory. Marxist feminist theorists argued the traditional household was not a personal sanctuary, but a capitalist factory fueled by unpaid domestic labor, called social reproduction. To break this cycle, radical theorists argued the private family had to be deconstructed. Tasks historically handled by parents, like childcare and moral instruction, needed to be transferred directly to the state. Dismantling the family's authority stripped away the primary buffer. This created a sovereignty vacuum, leaving the citizen atomized, exposed, and without traditional domestic support. The state filled this void by shifting from political representation to therapeutic governance. To manage a population it now defines as inherently vulnerable, the government replaced organic parental authority with an ever-expanding apparatus of experts and regulatory boards. Over time, the definition of safety mutated. It stretched from basic physical protection to absolute psychological comfort, where offensive ideas are framed as literal violence. The state now operates as a managerial matriarchy. Because a bureaucracy built on absolute safety requires absolute predictability, any independent masculine variance is treated as a direct threat to institutional survival. Every political machine requires a legal philosophy to validate its actions. The bedrock that allows this therapeutic state to function is a doctrine known as legal positivism. Natural law holds that pre-existing realities and familial rights strictly limit state power, creating boundaries the government can never cross. Positivism rejects this. It argues laws are merely social facts posited by bureaucrats, completely detached from inherent morality or human nature. Progressive legal theorists captured this malleable machinery to rewrite foundational definitions, like the family and free speech. If the law is a blank slate, these are no longer barriers against state overreach. They are fluid constructs that can be redefined overnight. As sociologist Max Maber predicted, modern societies fall into an iron cage of bureaucracy. Law becomes detached from cultural values, mutating into technical administrative rules. The modern compliance manager archetype thrives here. They do not need moral courage, they simply enforce technical HR rules under the banner of maintaining psychological safety. By transforming the organic social contract into an administrative compliance contract, legal positivism empowers the therapeutic state to erase individual autonomy simply by issuing an administrative decree. We can now see the fully assembled architecture. Biological survival tactics are scaled through institutional bias, weaponized by the therapeutic state, and locked into place by legal positivism. The structural stakes are severe. A society built entirely on the elimination of risk dries up its capacity for innovation, physical leadership, and its ultimate ability to govern itself. Reversing this institutional infantilization requires moving past shallow rhetoric to enact precise structural policy reforms. Legislatures must pass parental rights acts to restore private familial sovereignty. Furthermore, civil rights statutes must be reformed to explicitly prohibit public institutions from conditioning employment or funding on ideological linguistic codes. We must also re-engineer educational pipelines to accommodate kinetic learning styles and enact RAIN-style laws that return to natural rights by forcing explicit legislative votes on administrative agency roles. True human progress is not found in an artificial womb of bureaucratic safety. It is found in cultivating individual resilience and defending the natural rights that no state manager has the authority to erase.